Braves and baseball fans, it's time to take a trip from coast to coast across Major League Baseball.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run.
One strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed a perfect game.
Fly ball deep left center. Grissom on the run. Yes! 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 The Atlanta Braves have given you a championship. Listen to this crowd.
Left side, Swanson to first. Braves are world champions.
Braves and baseball talk, straight from the diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation.
Here's Grant McAuley.
Hello and welcome to From the Diamond. I am Grant McAuley. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We're live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday afternoon. Braves and Brewers have got to wrap up their series. They're going to do it in style in Williamsport at the Little League Classic. But the Braves, they need to change the style in which they've played. And we're going to be talking about that an awful lot because this has been, I would say, a forgettable week, a forgettable road trip, and a forgettable stretch of baseball for the Atlanta Braves, which just continues a theme that I want to get to in just a moment of what the Braves are, what you believe in, what the Braves aren't, whether or not you believe that. I mean, there's just a lot of sense to be made and things to be parsed through to decide exactly what this club is, and maybe, again, to the point, what it is not. But only time will tell on both of those things. But here lately, it just has not felt from a confidence level, confidence factor, like this is a club that is clicking on all 8 cylinders, because, in fact, it is not. I am not even sure if this version of the Braves is a V-twin. I really don't know, because it just hasn't felt like the engine wants to turn over, offensively speaking, and that's been a big, big problem for this team. And there are a few problem areas, a few trends, and a few players we're going to talk about that we'll try to get to the bottom of what's ailing them, but more importantly, try to size up what exactly it is they can do to kind of turn this thing around, what they need to get back to, the things they need to start doing well again, which does include scoring runs. I'm not going to bury that lead. If there was one thing that would fix the Atlanta Braves right now, it would be if the offense would start scoring runs in bunches again, because that has been the most frustrating of all the issues they have had this year. And trust me, they've had some issues. They've had some injuries. They've had some different positions of the team that have underperformed, and we're going to talk about those. They had the pitching questions, clearly, about the trade deadline and what the team could do or should do and what it ended up doing. And it feels like the trade deadline was a month ago or more. It just feels like that was forever ago. It hasn't even been 3 weeks. It'll be 3 weeks Monday, so tomorrow. It's been 20 days since the trade deadline, where a lot of people might have thought, well, the Braves' fate was sealed right there in what they do in the positive, or what they don't do in the negative, that will sink this club. And if there was anything that was going to sink this club, I've heard it time and again, and it may prove to be true. It may bear out. They don't have enough pitching. They don't have the quality of pitching they need to win in October. That could be the case. But I am just going to tell you, based on the baseball I have watched for the last 20 days, if the Braves cannot figure out a way to score runs more frequently than they have been doing in the month of August, it's not going to really matter how well you're pitching. And I'm going to give you some stats to back that whole thing up. But I guess the point is, this has just been the most Jekyll and Hyde kind of season for a team that is, last I checked, in first place in the National League East. They have had the Phillies at an arm's distance. They have had the Phillies breathing down their necks, which has been the case here lately, because the Phillies have been allergic to losing, but the Braves, meanwhile, have just not been able to figure out how to turn leads into wins. And those leads, I will stipulate, have been pretty few and far between, pretty scarce, pretty small when they do get them. But there are some areas that are really ailing the Braves that I didn't really think I'd be talking about this year as negatives or questions or problems down the stretch. And one of them is the top of the order. I mean, the top of the order, and I've got some stats to get into a little bit later about this, but just in general, 30,000-foot view is not doing the job. And the problem with that is when the top of the order doesn't do its job, it doesn't allow the middle of the order to do its job. Because for all the praise that we can heap on Matt Olson, and deservedly so, this is a guy that is on pace for 45 home runs. He is also on pace for 95 RBIs. I was wondering, how many times does a player in Major League Baseball history hit 45 home runs and not drive in 100 runs? Well, the answer is 4. It's happened 4 times in a century and a half worth of baseball. It's pretty rare. But whatever the case, I mean, the Braves have got some things to figure out in front of Matt Olson because Matt Olson's been doing his part. But at the top of the order, the guys that you need are two really, arguably, your best hitters, most talented hitters in the lineup, and they're just not getting the job done. It's Ronald Acuña Jr., former MVP, and the reigning Rookie of the Year, Drake Baldwin, who at times this year has looked like an even better version than the player that burst onto the scene last year and won that award. If I were to tell you that in the month of August, Ronald Acuña Jr. and Drake Baldwin have on-base percentages under 300, you probably wouldn't be racing to put them at the top of your lineup. Now, there are ebbs and flows to this season, and I'm certainly not telling you, hey, when a guy goes through 2 or 3 bad weeks, you need to drop him down to 9th every time. You don't need to do that. That's not necessary. You don't have to have a knee-jerk reaction, and that is why Walt Weiss or any manager is paid the big bucks, is you're managing the personalities too. So the Braves, I think, are going to have to get creative here over this next 5 weeks. I mean, obviously, this road trip, which was 7 games in 4 cities, the 4th of which is happening tonight. It's against the Brewers, but it's in Williamsport for the Little League Classic. This has pretty much been a debacle. And it started with a 3-game sweep in Minnesota, in which, if you were to look at it, the Braves are a hit away here or there from taking 2 out of 3 in that series. Instead, they're swept. So when I look at the Braves, and I watch the Braves, while frustrating as it may be, it's the thinnest of margins on some of these nights. And we'll get inside some of the stats about just how close the Braves have been to maybe not being as bad as it feels here lately. But I was looking at the month of August, especially because of how it's been lately, and thinking, all right, well, how many games under 500 are the Braves this month? Oh, wait. They're 10-10. Because this is the same team about 2.5 weeks ago. We were talking about wrapping up an 8-game win streak, which is their longest of the year. Again, this is the most Jekyll and Hyde feeling 20-game over 500 team that I think I've ever seen. Now, I grew up in the 80s on Braves baseball. I lived through the 90s. It's a beautiful time. And you're going to relive the 90s with me here today on From the Diamond because I'm going to have Steve Avery and Sid Bream, conversations I had with them as we go back in time and relive the 1991 season. I caught up with those guys at Alumni Weekend last week. Really, my focus was on the 91 team because it's been 35 years since the Braves went from being that perennial cellar dweller, that doormat of the National League West, to a team that expects to come to spring training and compete for a World Series and contend for that. Change the whole trajectory of the club to right here where we're standing, where we're talking right here today. Everything changed. The expectations changed. The whole dynamic of Atlanta Braves baseball went from being an afterthought to one of the perennial contenders. And the Braves are a contender right now, obviously. They've got to sort some things out, though, and they got to sort them out quick. Otherwise, they could be looking at a very uncomfortable month of September with the Phillies breathing down their necks. They've really, really got to get this offense going. Pitching-wise, I think everybody looked at the trade deadline and thought, all right, well, if the Braves didn't get 2 starting pitchers, which was kind of the thing that I threw down as, you got to get this, right? You got to get 2 proven veteran starting pitchers. They got Tyler Mahle. He's been terrific. They were not able to get that other one, though. But now you're looking at, dare I say it, too many starting pitchers? Potentially. We'll talk about exactly how that whole thing plays out. And I'm also going to have Chad Bishop of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution join me to kind of unpack this whole road trip. Because like I said, the Minnesota trip, not so great. Then you have the Chris Sale, Jacob Mizorowski matchup, or before you get to that, you had a good stop in Chicago one day. Nice 2-0 victory. Didn't have a lot of offense. Didn't need a lot of offense because Grant Holmes was flirting with a no-hitter and the bullpen was nails. And then you get into Milwaukee and a close game, a pitcher's duel. The Braves just not able to come up with the hits. And it's Mizorowski versus Sale, and the Miz is the guy that comes out on top. There's no shame in that, obviously, but, I mean, the Brewers are a team that you're chasing for one of the best records in baseball. They have it, actually. And now the Dodgers are going to be waiting on the other side of the off day on Monday, and that's not going to get any easier when the Braves get home. They have got to find some answers. They've got to find them quick. They've got to figure some things out in the lineup at the top. They got to figure out their shortstop situation. I think they need to figure out the DH situation. And they have to start sizing up exactly what this pitching staff is going to look like because you do have a plethora of starting pitchers, and some of them are going to have to serve different roles and could make your bullpen a little bit stronger. So I'll talk a little bit about where all the pieces fit. The only win that the Braves currently have in their luggage looking to bring home is a win in Chicago. They did not get a win in Minnesota, a sweep at the hands of the Minnesota Twins, who had not been playing really great baseball prior to that. Some low-scoring games there. You might be sensing a trend here. If you don't score enough runs, you don't win. That's the trend that has plagued the 2026 Braves here in the month of August. It also was plaguing them in the month of June. And in June, it was strange because all the home runs went away. And not long ago, I asked Walt Weiss about that, and he said, look, I don't know what exactly to point to for an entire team to stop slugging. It just didn't make a lot of sense. And I would tell you that right now it doesn't make a ton of sense, but I did start to get inside the run-scoring woes for the Braves and start to kind of deconstruct it and see exactly what it is the trends are telling us right now besides, hey, if you don't score enough, you lose. I think they're well aware of what happens when you don't score enough. A team that is not very well aware of that kind of thing or not having to deal with that problem at this moment is the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies did it again on Sunday, down 4-0 in the bottom of the ninth inning. They come off the decks and win it on a walk-off home run from Kyle Schwarber with 6 runs in the bottom of the ninth inning. It was an absolute implosion by the St. Louis Cardinals, and it just furthers the momentum for the Philadelphia Phillies because not only are they winning, they're winning in dramatic fashion. They're doing the things. And as of this moment, prior to the Little League Classic getting started, Phillies are now 2.5 games back. Remember back at the All-Star break, they were only 2 games back. It really felt like the Phillies were coming for a showdown with the Braves sooner than later. And then all of a sudden, the Phillies, they kind of fell off after the All-Star break, and the Braves, well, they went on a run for 3 or 4 weeks. And all of a sudden, that lead was back up to, I believe 8.5, 9 games. And now all of a sudden, that has absolutely vanished because the Braves, again, have lost 10 of their last 15 games. Just an absolute mess right now. The close losses are also back. And it's not just the one-run losses, but the struggles of the offense are more times than not what's sinking the Braves right now. They've dropped 3 straight series and 4 of their 5 series since that 8-game winning streak I was talking about. 6 of the 10 losses during this 15-game stretch we're talking about are by 2 runs or fewer. So more than half the time, it's a close game. And Atlanta's offense has scored 2 or fewer runs 9 times in the last 15 games. Again, it is hard to win if you don't score enough runs. And the pitching has not been a problem more times than not for the Braves. Sure, there's a lopsided loss here or there, but that's been the exception and not the rule. You're just not getting the runs that you need here. Braves offense in the month of August, 73 runs scored across 20 games. Somehow they're 10-10 in those 20 games. And, winning a few close games will help. But their run scoring ranks 25th in Major League Baseball in August. And it certainly feels that way. And nothing about this month feels like 500, but that is, in fact, what the Braves have been. But there are spots in this lineup that are really costing Atlanta and keeping this lineup from turning over, from doing the things that it needs to do, from creating those run-scoring opportunities, as I was talking about, for a guy like Matt Olson having an MVP season, on pace for 45 home runs, but less than 100 runs knocked in because the guys in front of him are not on base as consistently as they need to be, especially lately. And who am I talking about? Oh, I don't know. Only 2 of the Braves' absolute best hitters. And that's what's so baffling about this. And there's no script for it, obviously. Nobody's choosing to slump at the same time. But the 2 best choices, I would say, that you had here at the top 2 spots of the order are not getting it done. Ronald Acuña Jr. has a .244 on-base percentage this month. Ronald Acuña Jr., a guy that people can say what they want about the health and the availability of Ronald Acuña Jr. That's been a valid conversation and question, but you've got him right now, and he's not been able to play like the player that you need him to. When he came back from injury last year, outside of a scare here or there, you're still talking about a guy that came back at .290 with over 20 home runs and a .900 OPS. So I was looking at last year as just kind of a tune-up to be ready to be that kind of productive player at the top of the order again, and it's been anything but that. There have been a couple of waves of productivity from Ronald, but by and large, it's just not been that season. And we're going to get into what exactly it is that's ailing him in a moment. But it's not just Acuña. It's Drake Baldwin as well. He is once again kind of in one of those lulls that when he came off the injured list, and I can stipulate, you don't get much in terms of a rehab assignment. You're just thrown back against Major League pitching. That can go south real quick, and it did on Drake Baldwin. And then he kind of figured it out. And he got red hot again, and he just kind of felt like, all right, the confidence is back. Drake looks like himself again. And it's not that he's completely disappeared, but the power has disappeared. The run production has disappeared. And Drake Baldwin's on-base percentage this month is .297. If you've got a .244 on base and a .297 on base guy at the top of your lineup, it's going to be very difficult to get things rolling the way that you want to because those guys aren't getting on base enough. 2 of your most talented, most important hitters going through it at the same time. You simply need more from them the next 5 weeks. Doesn't matter how you get there. Doesn't matter what happened before. Doesn't matter what's happened up to this moment. But moving forward, the Braves are going to need a lot more out of Ronald Acuña Jr. This is the understatement of the show. Go ahead and set your markers accordingly. You're going to need more out of Ronald Acuña Jr. than a .244 on base percentage. And you're going to need much more out of Drake Baldwin as well because those 2 guys are capable of so much more. Those are game-changing lineup-changing bats. And you got to get them going. But you've also got a couple of other things that are really plaguing Atlanta in this lineup, and one of them is the shortstop issue. We've been talking about this one a lot. It's been a black hole, ultimately, and I wanted to know exactly just how bad has shortstop been productivity-wise for the Atlanta Braves, because this is a conversation that stretches back when Dansby Swanson left as a free agent. Then Orlando Arcia kind of magically came in, had a pretty good year in 2023. Then he vanished in 2024 as a productive player. 2025, most of the at-bats went to Nick Allen, a glove-first shortstop who did not hit, did not homer, didn't have much going there, but that's who you turned it over to. 2026, you spent $20 million on a free agent in Ha-Seong Kim, and you also traded for Mauricio Dubon, who you knew could play the position too. You felt like you had maybe solved that problem by some depth and some quality, and Mauricio Dubon has added a lot to this team. And I think he is the answer at shortstop. If we want to flip to the end, go to the last chapter, last page, who is the answer at shortstop for the Braves in 2026 is Mauricio Dubon. Next question. But this has just been a bafflingly bad position for the Braves. Shortstops for Atlanta hitting .215 this year. That's 27th in baseball. On basing .269. That's 29th in baseball. And slugging just .319. That is 27th in baseball. This is across the board abysmal production from this particular spot. And I would say if everything else was going well and you were just trying to carry one spot, you could kind of live with it. You don't like it, but you could live with it. If everything else is being made up for in the aggregate because you've got multiple outfielders slugging their way through the season. You've got other infielders doing their thing. You've got a big DH having a great year. Your catchers are hitting. You could kind of deal with it. I would understand it. But those things aren't all happening. Your right fielder is going through it. Your left field situation has been a platoon all year. Your center fielder's having a career year. Your third baseman having a career worst year. Your second baseman, hot start, been kind of hit or miss. Your first baseman's having a career year. And then you've got Drake Baldwin, who's been, again, just a little bit up and down here after the month of May. And injury was certainly part of that. But here lately, and Drake Baldwin's not the only one, don't get it wrong. I'm not picking on him because he's been far more good than bad this year. But these are the guys you expect to come up with the big hits. We don't need to be talking about what can Jim Jarvis do for this team as much as we need to be talking about the things that are actually happening from the star-level players. Austin Riley has certainly gotten his fair share of this year. He's the highest-paid player on the team. He's got the biggest contract. Obviously, the expectations are what they are. That's why you get that contract. And he has gone through it and has been better in the second half and perhaps has a bigger role to play here over the next 5 weeks. I would say if the Braves want to do the things that they want to do, by the time October rolls around, you're going to need some stuff from Austin Riley. Some important at-bats, some important base hits, some important run production. You're going to need all of that. But the shortstop thing has just been bafflingly bad. And I said this last week. If the playoffs start tomorrow, Mauricio Dubon is the answer at shortstop. But I'm really just curious about where exactly Ha-Seong Kim fits on this roster. Because if there's anything you can get out of him, you're going to have to find out here, I would assume, by throwing him a handful of at-bats here or there. Now, I also understand that when the club's not playing well and a player hasn't been playing well, it's going to be very hard to reinsert them into the roster, but I didn't realize it was going to be this difficult. He's been activated from the IL since the day after the trade deadline. That is August the 4th if you're scoring at home. He hasn't played in 8 days. He's appeared in just 4 games, with one of those being a start, since being activated from the IL on August the 4th. I'm just curious why this is somebody who has a roster spot, and I'm aware that he's making $20 million. I just don't understand. If you're not going to use him at all, the money is the money. It's already spent. It's gone. Is there a more useful player that you could bring up that could help kickstart your offense? Because apparently you're not going to turn to him. And again, on the merits of that argument, I don't blame you. But you're just not using him. And it just feels like any benefit he had from going out on that rehab assignment has been completely lost at this juncture because he's just come up and sat on the bench for nearly 3 weeks. And the DH spot is another place for the Braves that I feel like is going to need some work. You can rotate a guy in there a couple times a week. Maybe you want to get Ronald Acuña Jr. a day there. Maybe you want to get whoever it is. But with Sean Murphy back, why not catch him more and DH Drake Baldwin a bit? Kind of keep Drake off his legs, like out of the crouch as much as you can, because catcher is a demanding position. Manage that workload a little bit. And maybe Sean Murphy's bat does get going. And I know that's a big maybe. I understand. I can look at the back of his card. I can look at the stats. I understand what he hasn't been. But I also understand that he's back and he can be impactful for the pitching staff and take a load off a player that you're really trying to get going again. Maybe that would be worth looking into. Because Dominic Smith, unfortunately, while a great story over the first, 6-7 weeks of the year, has completely disappeared. The last 55 games Dominic Smith has played in, he's batting a .196 with 3 home runs and an OPS of .554. That is your designated hitter. He's not playing first base. He's not playing the outfield. He's doing some pinch hitting, sure. But the number one job of this guy is to be an extra bat in the lineup, and it's not a productive bat. So there's, I don't think, any reason whatsoever to prioritize at bats for him at this point, especially when you go out, you get Lane Thomas, who's been a useful hitter throughout the course of his career. Sure, you got him because of the matchup against lefties, but I think he could, with regular bats, give you a little bit more punch there. He could play left field as you need him to. Mike Yastrzemski can play some left field as you need him to, and he's been one of your better hitters, by the way. The last 33 games for Mike Yastrzemski, OPS just under 900. It started off pretty rough for Yastrzemski, but he's been one of the better hitters. But obviously, he's not a guy that you're really putting the hopes of your season on every at bat that he goes up there. He's one of those players, I feel like, that makes you better in the aggregate. But that's your left field platoon with Dubon at shortstop, I think, for the foreseeable future, because the Braves kind of have to start treating this stretch of games they're in as kind of a playoff warm-up, a playoff preview. You had these tough games with the Brewers. Mauricio Dubon was getting some run at shortstop. You got an upcoming tough series against the Los Angeles Dodgers. That's going to be 3 games that are incredibly meaningful for the overall standings in the National League because the top 2 teams, top 2 records, do not have to play in the wild card round. If you're the 3rd division winner, congratulations. You might as well be a wild card team because you're also going to be playing in the wild card round, which means you're going to have to burn some of your best pitchers to get through the wild card round to get to the National League Division Series, and you're not going to be able to reset your rotation. So then what plans, if any, do you have if you're a club that does not have a bevy of ace-level starting pitchers to turn to? Your best laid plan could be burned in the wild card round. Now, I will say winning the wild card round would certainly be progress. The Braves have not been able to win a postseason series in their last 3 trips, but if you don't have to play in that round, you still don't want to. Just putting that out there. Not breaking news, but it's just kind of where the Braves find themselves right now is some very, very important games, and they're not playing at their best. And it's coming when the opposition is about as tough as it can possibly get with the Brewers and the Dodgers on deck as well. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about what's going on, what's going wrong with the 2026 Braves, and how to get it back on track with Chad Bishop of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He joins me next right here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
I love baseball. Now back to more Grant McAuley and From the Diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90-NATION. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back to From the Diamond with Grant McAuley here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We are live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday. Braves and Brewers wrapping up their series in Williamsport for the Little League Classic. And to talk about this Braves road trip, as difficult as it's been, I want to welcome Chad Bishop of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution into the show. He is on the road with the team and, of course, heading to Williamsport with the Braves to close out this 7-game, 4-city road trip that Atlanta has been on. Well, Chad, I appreciate you making the time. I know this has been a busy trip for the Braves. It's been a busy trip for everyone covering the Braves as well. Look, the month of August, we can't really sugarcoat it. It's been a roller coaster ride for the Braves. It feels like the trade deadline was months ago now, but it's been less than 3 weeks. And this is a team that, despite being in first place and despite being 20 games over 500, does not feel like a team should under those circumstances. So we'll dive into all the particulars here in a moment, but I'm just curious to you, watching this team on a daily basis, how would you size up the state of the Braves heading into the last week of August?
Yeah, I mean, on the field, it's not been good, right? I mean, they've not been playing good ball the last week, a week and a half, whether it's timely hitting, whether it's defense. It's reminiscent of the struggles they went through in June. Teams go through this, we know that, and I'm confident they'll break their way out of it. But just a lot of the things that went right during that recent 8-game winning streak or during their really good play April, May, certainly not going that direction now. If they get a good start, the bullpen can't finish it off. If they get some offense, the starting pitching isn't there. If they're in a tight game, the defense seems to have a lapse in play. So a lot of things not going right for this team. But as you guys know, I mean, baseball is contagious, and it takes a few timely hits here and there, and things start rolling in the other direction. And I think this past weekend in Milwaukee, they were close to having some big hits, but Milwaukee outplayed them to take the series. and they got to figure their way out of this now. It's going to be tough going up to Williamsport in this sort of one-off game. The off day probably can't come soon enough for this club because they're really going through it right now. That being said, haven't seen anybody hanging their heads or too down and out in that clubhouse. I mean, those guys are professional. Mike Harris was talking about it the other day. Like, they know they're gonna get out of it. Martin Perez echoed those sentiments. He knows this offense is good and what they can do. So it's just a matter of fighting their way through it. There's no days off in this game, more or less. So you got to figure out a way to get those hits, get those pitches, make those plays, and try to hold off these Phillies who are charging in the standings.
Yeah, once again, the Phillies are on a hot streak, and it seems like that's kind of been a story this season. It's been a roller coaster for the first-place team. It's been a roller coaster for the second-place team, and you're right. There's another game tomorrow until there's not, I guess, is kind of how you have to approach it. That is the beauty of the baseball season, but also when you're not going so well, sometimes the agony of the baseball season. There are a lot of things, though, I think that are kind of ailing this club. You touched on a bunch of them, but I think everyone thought that pitching was going to be the thing that sinks them. Instead, it's the offense that's been sinking to the bottom third of the league production levels here in August. I think it all starts at the top. Drake Baldwin and Ronald Acuña Jr. have combined for an on-base percentage of just under 270 this month, Chad. They aren't the only ones who've been going through it, but it is hard to score runs when your top two hitters aren't getting on base.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, everybody in this lineup is struggling to some extent outside of really Matt Olson, right, who's the constant and, was in the at least on the fringes of the MVP discussion, and still may be by the time it's all said and done. But it seems like all these guys are trying to do too much. I think Mike Yastrzemski had a great comment the other day about guys going up there and trying to hit 6-run home runs instead of moving the line. And it seems like that's the case, especially at the top of the order. I mean, Ronald Acuña really struggled and had a couple opportunities in Milwaukee to have some big hits, whether they were game-tying or game-changing hits. Just doesn't seem to be seeing the ball really well. And Drake Baldwin, he's kind of had one of those seasons where, as good as he's been at times, he's also struggled a little bit, maybe for the first time in his career. And with those two guys at the top of the order, right, they're the table setters. So when they're not getting it done, you get the triple down effect, where you don't have guys on base for Matt Olson or Michael Harris or even Mauricio Dubon or Ozzie Albies in the heart of that order. So if they get those guys going, right, it's a whole different ball game. But right now, those guys are really, really struggling from the plate, and they need to turn it around sooner rather than later because time in the hourglass is running out.
Yeah, those sands are definitely trickling down. We're chatting with Chad Bishop of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He covers the Braves. He's joining me here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Look, I want to talk about Ronald Acuña Jr. for a minute because for as great as he has been at times in his career, one of the big strengths that he's always had is his ability to handle whatever is thrown his way. But what I'm seeing this year, and I'm sure you are too, is clearly not the best version of Acuña. He's had some injuries, yes, but he's getting beat on fastballs consistently, and he's never had a full season with a negative value on four-seamers, according to StatCast. He's at -8 as far as his run value on that pitch this year, batting .124 and running a 29% strikeout rate on four-seamers. I don't know how you even begin at this stage of the season to fix that kind of thing, but he's going to have to figure it out, and the Braves certainly need a lot more from their superstar right fielder, and that seems to be, right now, his kryptonite.
No, you're right about that. I was talking with some of the other broadcast guys the other day about Ronald's struggled against that pitch, and it especially seems like the upper half of the zone is really a struggle. It seems like Ronald can get the sinker or maybe some of the fastballs down in the zone, but when they start to rise, he's swinging and missing. So really kind of confusing and alarming. We sort of saw the same thing out of Austin Riley for much of the first half of the season, and Austin seems to have corrected those flaws. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure why Ronald is having trouble with that particular pitch because you're right. It seems like 100 miles per hour usually is something that Ronald has been able to handle throughout his career. I don't know if there's maybe just a lack of trust or if it's just thinking about it too much or maybe it's a batting stance issue or a hands issue, something perhaps I need to go talk to Tim Hyers about to see what he's seeing on his end. But, yeah, Ronald just can't seem to catch up to that fastball, and it's not even the 98, 99s. The last night, Saturday night in Milwaukee against Logan Henderson, who throws 92, 93, sometimes 94, was throwing the ball right by Ronald. So certainly concerning for him, and, again, has to figure out a way. We know Ronald is trying, right? He works hard and he cares a lot. So it's got something I'm sure weighing him down that he's got to figure out over the next few weeks.
Yeah, it's kind of been his burden to carry, and you're right. It's not just the high-octane fastballs. It's 92, 93, 94, many of them in what you would assume would be hittable zones as well, that Ronald is just not putting his best swing on and just not able to do that damage that we've been accustomed to seeing. And we talk about those top couple of spots in the order, whether it's Acuña or Baldwin and whatever, fashion Walt Weiss wants to put him up there. They are batting ahead of Matt Olson, who, as you mentioned, is making an MVP case for himself. That might have quieted down over the last couple of weeks, but I can assure you, as you well know, he's having a great season. And despite his prolific power, Olson is on pace for 45 home runs this season, but just 95 runs batted in. Only 4 times in Major League history has a player hit 45 or more homers and driven in fewer than 100 runs. That's our trivia for today on the show. That could just be a quirky stat, Chad, or it could be a sign of exactly what we're talking about, which is the struggles of the top 2 spots in the order. And to go back to exactly what Mike Yastrzemski said, you can't hit a 6-run homer. Well, Matt Olson can't hit multiple run home runs if there's nobody on base in front of him.
I would really like to see, and I sort of asked Walt Weiss about this the other day, and about maybe changing the lineup around, changing the batting order, and he said that's probably not going to happen, but I personally would like to see that a little bit. I know if you take Ronald Acuña out of the first couple of spots in the order, that's one of your, theoretically, right, best talents and best hitters that you don't get to see in the first inning. But with the struggles that those guys have been going through, maybe give Mauricio Dubon a chance at leadoff, or an Ozzie Albies a chance at the 2-hole, something to get some guys on base in front of Matt Olson. And maybe instead of Matt Olson hitting third, maybe you drop him down to fourth. Again, you take the risk that Matt Olson, your best hitter, does not get up in that first at-bat in that first inning, but something to spark this offense, even if it's for a game or two, right? And then go back to that traditional standard lineup you've been using for most games. Just, again, something to give teams a different look. I know Austin Riley has struggled, right, for much of this year, but he's had some really good at-bats after the All-Star break. Started to hit the long ball, started to drive in some runs. He's been buried at 7th, 8th, 9th in the lineup. Maybe you give him a look at the 3-hole or the 5-hole in some of these games moving forward, just to sort of shake things up, give the opposition a different look, maybe get the ball rolling offensively a little bit. Maybe I need to press Walt a little bit more on that issue moving forward.
I'd like to say there's no wrong answer sometimes when you're trying to figure your way out of some struggles, but as you well know, it can compound the issue. And, we're looking at it from the outside perspective of how do you get more production? He's looking at it from inside that clubhouse. How do I manage all of these personalities as well throughout these highs and lows of this baseball season? I do want to stick with something else that you just mentioned, which is shortstop for the Braves. Jim Jarvis has been a big part of this, and I've been talking about this for a while. The Braves shortstop dilemma, if you will, seems to kind of be at a boiling point. Jarvis was a great story for a few weeks. He lifted the club in a spot where you really needed someone to come in and do just that, and he is pretty solid with the glove, but his production at the plate has pretty much fallen off a cliff this month, and he's not the only Braves shortstop who's obviously gone through some offensive struggles this year. If the playoffs started tomorrow, which they don't, Mauricio Dubon, I think, is your shortstop, and you give left field to Yaz or Lane Thomas and play the matchups there. Is there any reason why the Braves shouldn't approach things that way right now? Because I feel like as you're struggling right now to talk about things that can spark the club or just push them in the right direction, your best lineup out there kind of helps you put your best foot forward, doesn't it?
No, I'm with you 100%. And like you said, Jim Jarvis was a great story. Jimmy Baseball, we all got to know, can pick it at shortstop and had some timely hits. But you've seen the league adjust to him, as happens. I mean, he's grounding out a ton, hitting the ball to second base or first base a lot. I think over his recent hitting slump, he's down to 060 or 070 in his current 2 for 40-something or whatever it is. Really struggling at the plate. And I wouldn't be surprised, quite honestly, going into Sunday night here in Pennsylvania. Brewer Hicklin has been added to the roster as an extra man for this one-off special game. I'd be curious to see if maybe Brewer Hicklin sticks around instead and Jim Jarvis goes back to AAA, maybe at least until September, right, when the call-ups happen, because Mauricio Dubon is a solid shortstop, veteran guy. We know what he does with runners in scoring position. And you added Lane Thomas, another outfielder, at the trade deadline to platoon with Mike Yastrzemski. Again, as fun as the story was for Jim Jarvis early on, just not getting done at the plate. And when he's out there in the starting lineup, to be quite honest, right, it's an automatic out right now. And I think if the Braves again are going to turn this offense around and turn the losses into wins, Mauricio Dubon has got to be your starting shortstop, and maybe Jim Jarvis needs to go back down to AAA, recalibrate, refocus, maybe get that swing back in a good place before rejoining the team in September or maybe in 2027.
Yeah, and that's to say nothing of what do you do or do you not do with Ha-Seong Kim, who has been added back to the active roster but has basically been the 26th man, for lack of a better term. He really has not been utilized very much, if at all, for much of the past 3 weeks. I'm not making the case that he's going to come in and fix the offensive woes, but at some point you would, I think, at least be curious enough to give him a few at-bats to see if perhaps he's able to pitch in some way, shape, or form, but that may be a smaller problem on the scale for the Braves. I do want to talk about pitching before we wrap up here. A.J. Smith-Shawver back from Gwinnett. Kind of a mixed bag start in his return, but obviously it's critical they explore what he can do in the final month plus, with an eye on October for a potential role for him. But we've got Chris Sale, Bryce Elder, Martin Perez, Tyler Mahle, and Grant Holmes all starting. Reynaldo Lopez began a rehab assignment this weekend. How do you think the Braves are going to handle this group and those innings over the final 5 weeks? Because Walt has said time and again, I don't want to run a six-man for an unlimited amount of time.
Yeah, because you have that six-man rotation, right, and you're going to be short a bullpen arm. We know Grant's been in the bullpen. Martin's been in the bullpen a little bit. Reynaldo Lopez has been in the bullpen a little bit, but he started at AAA Gwinnett. They want him to be a starter. They see him as a starter. I think what we have to remember is, this next 5-6 weeks of the regular season is all just sort of building and setting up for the postseason. And once you get to the postseason, right, like all bets are off. Like Chris Sale's going to be your starter. Tyler Mahle's going to be your starter. But from there, right, like guys are going to be asked to pitch whenever they can get outs and whenever they see matchups. So it's going to be a juggling act. I think over the next few weeks they were able to skip Bryce Elder's start recently with A.J. Smith-Shawver being in the rotation. I talked to Bryce on Saturday. His knee is feeling a lot better. He's ready to go to make his next start probably next week, whether that's against the Dodgers or Rockies. We'll find out. But they have some options, right, with these 6 current starters on the roster, with the 7th and Reynaldo Lopez being down there. Someone's going to have to go to the bullpen. That's just the way it is. But, again, it's just going to be a matter of sort of getting to that finish line, finishing out the regular season, and maybe all these guys are going to be on that postseason roster and asked to pitch at some point and some high-leverage situation in a very important playoff game.
Yeah, and you alluded to this earlier. There will be a roster expansion in September, so all of a sudden that extra guy who might be considered a starter could be on your roster, not negatively affect you from the bullpen having to be short while also having that guy. So just something to keep in mind as we do get into September. But that is a week away. There's some very big games between now and then. Obviously, a tough trip to Minnesota for the Braves, a mixed bag as well on this road trip, to say the least. You have a win in Chicago, a couple of tough losses in Milwaukee. Now the Little League Classic. Tell me a little bit about what you're expecting there and how excited you are to be around for one of Major League Baseball's, I guess you'd call them a special attraction type event.
It's going to be unique, that's for sure. Bowman Field only seats about 3,000 people, going to be filled with the Little Leaguers themselves, their families, the coaches and staffs of those teams. Very intimate, unique atmosphere. The Braves are flying from Milwaukee on Sunday morning to get to Williamsport on Sunday afternoon. The Brewers actually flew to New York City on Saturday night, and they're coming over to Williamsport on Sunday afternoon as well. But it'll be really, really interesting and unique and pretty cool, I think, to see the players interact with a lot of these kids, especially the kids, international kids, right, to see them experience a Major League Baseball game, a showcase for MLB on ESPN. I'm going to be curious to see how the players sign the autographs and take the selfies, and which players the kids gravitate to during this experience. I don't think it's incredibly cumbersome for the players. I mean, they get on their buses and planes and go play wherever they're told to. And I think it could be a little bit of a break, right, from the monotony of the season of playing every single day in the same ballparks. This will be something different and unique for a lot of these guys. And maybe from the Braves' perspective, maybe a break in the routine, right? Maybe a break from the monotony of playing every single day in the same stadium, doing something different. Maybe it'll help them get the offense going, something different, a change of pace, right, a change of scenery. Maybe that'll get the bats going a little bit on a Sunday night in Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
Chad, I appreciate all of your time as always, and I look forward to catching you at the ballpark this week.
All right, my friend. Thanks.
He's Chad Bishop of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on the road with the Braves as they wrap up their 7-game road trip. We got much more Braves and baseball talk coming your way as From the Diamond with Grant McAuley continues right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
All right, play ball!
Your place for all things MLB and our Braves. This is From the Diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back in to From the Diamond with Grant McAuley here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We're live from the Kia Studios. It is Sunday evening. Braves and Brewers will wrap up their 3-game series, and Atlanta comes on home for a 7-game homestand that begins with 3 very tough games against the LA Dodgers, a team that always seems to be the club that you've got to get through if you're a team trying to do anything in the National League in October. And that's been that way for a while, but especially the last 2 years as the Dodgers are looking to be a three-peat champion, something that does not happen too often in Major League Baseball. More on that later on in the year. And as we've talked about for the Braves, it's not about necessarily having to have the best record in baseball, but you want to have one of the two best in your league so you can avoid this wild card round. And the run-scoring problems have really been an issue for the Braves, but I remember coming into this month, doing the show and talking to folks and social media and doing calls on the station and interviews at different places and different spots and just talking to folks around the game. All the discussion was about the Braves pitching. The Braves pitching is going to be an issue if they don't make XYZ number of trades for the rotation, for the bullpen. And I'm not going to tell you that pitching can't become a problem for the Braves because I think as we've seen, things can go wrong. But the pitching has actually been the strength of the club here in the month of August. And it doesn't start anywhere other than the greatness of Chris Sale. I want to talk about that. And you may have seen this on social media this week. If you don't follow me, at Grant McAuley is where you can find me in most places. And I like to get a deep dive into the stats and then tell you some things that sometimes will just, hopefully uplift you. And sometimes it will just be a reminder of things not going right when they're supposed to. And things are supposed to go right when Chris Sale is pitching, right? That's your ace. That's a Cy Young contender. That's a future Hall of Famer. And Chris Sale is holding up his end of the bargain. Chris Sale this year has been one of the best pitchers in the National League again. But I had to look at the amount of times that the Braves have come up short on days that he's been pitching and see what exactly has gone on here. In 9 losses and 2 no decisions this year. So Chris Sale has won 12 games. He's lost 9. He has 2 no decisions. That's 23 total starts if you're scoring at home. And if you're not, it's 23 total starts anyway. Chris Sale, in his victories, has a 1.58 ERA and has struck out 10.5 batters per 9, has been dominant. Chris Sale, in those 11 starts in which the Braves don't win, has a 2.95 ERA and has struck out nearly 12 batters per 9, 9 losses and 2 no decisions. And I believe they did win one of those no decisions for him. But 9 losses that have been charged to Chris Sale. Still a sub-3 ERA. This is a great pitcher. Now, if you go into this even more and then start to compare it to what the Braves have done or not done for him, Sale has allowed more than 3 earned runs just one time in his 23 starts this year. You might remember April 6th, it was 6 runs against the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim of Orange County of California in just 4 innings. He's allowed 2 earned runs or fewer in 6 of the 9 losses charged to Chris Sale. So, games like Friday, in which the Braves lose to the Brewers, and Jacob Mizorowski is a great pitcher, probably going to win the Cy Young, going to have a stake in the MVP voting as well. But Chris Sale, unfortunately, was on the other end of that as a tough luck loss. The Braves this year just 13-10 when Sale pitches. They've scored 3 runs or fewer in 11 of his 23 starts, and 2 runs or fewer in 8 of those 9 losses. If that sounds like a lot of numbers that don't add up to anything good, they are. There are a whole bunch of them. But if you're to ask me, in 23 starts, how many of these games should the Braves have won for Chris Sale or on days Chris Sale pitches? 17? 18? He's put him in position to win 20 or 21 times at the very least. Really, 22 times out of the 23 times that he has pitched. And one of them, I think, is a rainout. So let's call it 21 out of 23. That's a pretty good percentage. That's how great Chris Sale is. But you already knew that. And the Braves are going to figure out a way to get this run-scoring problem addressed. And Braves pitching has not been a problem this month. To go back to my original point after the trade deadline, rotation in the month of August has a 2.87 ERA in 20 starts. But the rotation record is 6-8. So it's not just Chris Sale who's taking it on the chin with a tough luck loss or a no decision. I mean, 20 games, the Braves starters have been credited with just 6 wins. The pitching staff overall has a 3.18 ERA. So that's the entire composite staff ERA, one of the best in baseball. Quality work no matter how you slice it. No matter if it's the starters or relievers, you're getting the pitching you need to. But you have to contrast that against the Braves offense right now, and it's just not working. 3.6 runs per game in August, but I'm going to tell you something my old friend Chip Carey used to tell me. Yeah, but that's deceiving. And why do I say that? Because 3.6 runs per game pretty much tells you they're not scoring enough, and it does. But 25 of the 73 runs the Braves have scored this month came in 3 games. So you take those 3 games and kind of put them out to the side. I know this is cherry picking for cherry picking's sake, but the vast majority of the time, the Braves are not scoring 10 runs, 8 runs, even 6 runs per game. I mean, that's what I'm putting to the side. Is 3 games in which the offense really just had a night. Because by and large, 85, 90% of the time, you're not getting that kind of run support. And Chris Sale and his record and the starting pitchers and the no decisions and the amount of tough luck losses that they've had this month kind of underscores the pitching is doing its job, but the offense has just not been able to figure it out. Now, the Braves have 6 starting pitchers on their roster right now. But Walt Weiss said last week he does not see the 6-man rotation as something that they can run for a long period of time because eventually it's going to tax your bullpen because you got the one less arm out there. Now, there is something to keep in mind, something Alex Anthopoulos told me right after the trade deadline, and it's going to be kind of in relation to A.J. Smith-Shawver, who I'm going to talk about in a moment. But the question was, where and how are you going to manage some of the innings? A.J. Smith-Shawver is coming off Tommy John surgery. We all know that. But a supremely talented pitcher, and his return to the Braves has allowed them to reorganize their rotation a little bit, reorder it, and have Chris Sale pitch against the Brewers, which didn't work, unfortunately. But he's also going to get a start against the Dodgers. And A.J. Smith-Shawver got into some trouble against the Twins. It wasn't a great start. He wasn't his sharpest, but I think this next 5 weeks is essential to see how he can impact your pitching plans in general. With an eye on October, a talented arm like that, where could he factor in? So that's why A.J. Smith-Shawver is back right now. But again, that does create the 6-man rotation issue, which eventually takes away from the bullpen. But one thing that Alex pointed out, to get back to that, is in September you get a roster expansion. You go from 26 players to 28 players. That could allow you to not have to go lacking in the bullpen just to carry the extra starter. So that could be something that allows the Braves to be a little bit more creative with this. But it's not just A.J. Smith-Shawver who has rejoined the Braves rotation. You got Ronaldo Lopez on a rehab assignment with AAA Gwinnett, but he's going to be back at some point. And Ronaldo has pitched some in relief. And he's pitched some in relief in his career, obviously, but he's pitched some in relief in his season this year. He started in rotation and got bumped to the bullpen. And just taking a look at what he was able to do on this day, 4 innings, 3 hits, scoreless ball, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts for Ronaldo Lopez. And it looks like for Lopez, he was able to throw 50 pitches. So that's an efficient 4 innings, certainly. And that would tell me that, and he hasn't missed a ton of time here. It's been about, 3 weeks or so since that left knee inflammation that just popped up about an hour before the game. They had to, I think, go find Martin Perez, who may have been taking a nap at that point, and say, hey, buddy, you got time to pitch a game for us? And he goes out there and flirts with a no-hitter, carries it into the 7th inning. Maybe that's how we need to get Martin Perez ready for every start. Don't let him know he's pitching. We'll tell him in an hour. I don't know. Maybe that won't work. Either way, though, to get back to the point, the Braves have got to figure out where Ronaldo Lopez fits into this staff. And this is kind of a good problem to have because obviously you're not going to use 6 starters, and clearly you're not going to use 7 starters. So some of these guys are going to be able to help you out in the bullpen, and we'll see exactly who that could be. I think that the obvious candidates are Grant Holmes, who has been far more good than bad this year. I've been talking about that for a while. I know that sometimes he gets in trouble in that 4th or 5th inning, and Walt Weiss has not been shy about getting the early hook out there. But for the most part, he's at least kept you in the ballgame. Even if it hasn't been ideal from an innings perspective, he's gone out there and competed and hasn't really left you in the hole outside of a couple of blow-ups. And over the course of 25, 30 starts, whatever it is, every starting pitcher in baseball is going to have a couple that just aren't going to go well. And I'm not making a case for Grant Holmes to anchor the rotation, but he's been a contributor. And again, to use that phrase, far more good than bad. But how much could he help you in the bullpen if you're able to use him for 4 outs, 5 outs, where that other lineup only gets that one look at him? How much more could he lean on that slider, that big swing and miss pitch that he has? That is an elite pitch, by the way, strikeout pitch. Especially in the postseason when you're thinking about, all right, how far can we push a starter? And if he does get in trouble, you're going to have a quick hook because you're going to utilize the bullpen that you have, which is going to be expanded because you're not carrying 5 starters. You're going to be carrying like 3 starters, maybe 4. And the 4th guy is pretty much going to be sitting out there in the bullpen just waiting. But either way, I think he could help you. I think Ronaldo Lopez could help you in the bullpen. And the Braves are starting to figure some things out there as well in regards to what that's going to look like when they can get Robert Suarez back in the saddle. That's the next guy you want to see out on a rehab assignment, and how soon could that happen? Could it be this week? He's getting himself ramped up for a return in September. He definitely needs to graduate to throwing bullpens and facing live hitters and then getting that rehab assignment because he has not thrown in a major league game since I believe it's the 25th or 26th of June. So for Suarez, this is going to be a multiple appearance rehab assignment that would put him back, I would say conservatively, best case scenario, maybe about 3 weeks from now. That would be my guess. If it's sooner than that, I'd be a little bit surprised, but we'll see. But let's call it early mid-September, somewhere around the 8th to the 15th. If it's the middle of September, that's just fine too. But the Braves didn't want to take any chances with his rehab and have him push through any soreness, any residual pain or inflammation that he was dealing with, Because if he had a setback, a real setback, there may not be time to ramp him back up and he'd be lost for the year, and that would be quite a blow to the Braves bullpen, despite how good Didier Fuentes has been, despite how good Dylan Lee has been, and despite the fact that you do have a closer in Raisel Iglesias, who, I'll use the phrase again, is far more good than bad. But nobody's perfect. You need Robert Suarez in there because he just gives you that fourth piece that could really, really make a difference, especially in a playoff scenario. That's what we talked about with the night shift. It wasn't one or two relievers. It was the depth that you had and the fact that all of these guys are different. I mean, Raisel Iglesias and Robert Suarez, very different pitchers. Dylan Lee and Didier Fuentes, very different pitchers. You put all four of them out there, you give an opposing lineup all kinds of different looks and different arsenals you have to deal with, and that's the beauty of having a bullpen like that could be a huge weapon for the Braves in October. I think it's one of the best groups as far as bullpens are concerned that you're going to find in baseball. If you can bridge those first, or you can get through that first 5 to 6 innings, and you can bridge maybe the 5th or 6th inning with some of these guys, some of these middle relievers, you could really make the game a lot shorter with a bullpen like that. And that's kind of what the Braves want to have with Robert Suarez back in the saddle. That was the whole point of signing him, was not just to have, which one's going to close? No, it's to figure out how do you cover all of those outs. Not the final 3 outs, but the final 7 outs, the final 8, maybe 9, maybe 10 outs. How are you covering those in the postseason? Robert Suarez is going to be part of that, of course. So we'll talk a little bit more about him, or we'll give you as many updates as we can throughout the course of the week when we find out more about the prognosis of Robert Suarez and his progress towards a rehab assignment. And we'll be talking a little bit more about some of the things that the Braves are not enjoying, perhaps right now, some trends that aren't going so well for them here in 2026. But when we come back, we're going to turn back the clock to 1991. You'll hear from Sid Bream and Steve Avery, my conversations with them, coming your way next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Baseball, talking Braves and beyond. Baseball with From the Diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
We're going to talk a little bit about one of the great times to be a Braves fan, and that great time, if you didn't experience it, I'm here to tell you it was pretty great, even as a kid. 1991, worst to first. The Braves go from perennial cellar dwellers in the National League West to a team that every year since, it feels like, at least more times than not, the Braves have been a contender to be the last team standing. And that was not a way of life prior to 1991. A lot of things changed. And what changed exactly? Well, the Braves had really started drafting and developing players and building a young core that was ready to take that next step, but you needed leadership. You needed the right pieces to be added to that team. Bobby Cox went from being a general manager to being the manager again. John Sherholtz came in from Kansas City, and he got to work prior to 1991, bringing in veteran players to add to this great young farm system and young players who were on the rise, and everything just kind of came together in a way that was improbable and magical, and so many other things. And it all came down to the 7th game of the World Series in 1991 by the time it was all said and done. And as I like to say, and I will always say, too bad the wrong team won. But I got a chance to catch up with some of the 1991 Braves at Alumni Weekend a week ago at Truist Park. It was a really, really good time, some great discussions. And one of the guys I got to talk to was Sid Bream, who was one of the veterans who was brought in to kind of take this club to the next level. You know him very well from the slide in the 1992 NLCS, but Sid Bream and the signing of Sid Bream was a big deal for the Atlanta Braves taking that next step. So here's my conversation with Sid Bream. The 1991 season, it's hard to believe, but it has been 35 years since that magical season in Braves history. As everything was getting put together, there were a lot of great young players that the team had developed, but one of the needs that I think had been identified was defense and leadership, and those are a couple of boxes you checked for the Braves as you signed in 91. As a free agent, what was your criteria? What made you choose Atlanta?
You know, going back to that time frame, and I'll just tell you, I mean, I was a free agent, but the Pirates had told me at that point in time after we lost to the Cincinnati Reds that Sid Bream was the first priority to sign for the 91 year. So we weren't even thinking about going anyplace else, truthfully. And then throughout negotiations, they didn't get close to market price on me, let alone anything more for being their priority. And so the market opened up, and you know, we opened ourselves up and not even thinking anything about it, truthfully. And the Braves gave us a great offer, but even after that, I tried to stay in Pittsburgh. If they would have given me a no trade clause, I'd have stayed there.
Wow.
But it didn't happen. They said no to a no trade clause, and I said, man, if I'm your first priority, I'd hate to see what your last one is. And so we came down here to Atlanta not knowing what to expect other than the fact knowing that they, as you stated, they had a lot of great young ball players. And, John Sherholtz was bringing in some people that knew how to play the game and knew how to win. Obviously, Terry Pendleton, Charlie Lee Brandt, Rafael Belliard, shortstop. But they also had some leadership there. I had some winning underneath me. Yeah. It was a great fit. The young guys listened well. Bobby Cox and the rest of the coaching staff did a great job, and it got us to where we needed to be.
And where you needed to be was late into October, which is a place the Braves had really never experienced since moving to Atlanta. So as somebody who came into the team and was getting to know kind of what you had there and then start to watch the pitching start to click, the defense starting to click, the offense starting to click in different ways, how long did it take for this team that had never really been to this place before to start really believing that we belong here and this pennant race we're in with the Dodgers, we can win this thing?
Well, I truly believe, and one of the nice things, Bobby Cox, you don't find a lot of managers that allow this to happen, but Bobby Cox allowed Terry and myself, Charlie, to have team meetings without coaching staff. To be able to hash things out, to start talking things through and so on and so forth. And so we started to do that on a regular basis. Sometimes we got into some pretty good little spats, but trying to get the young players to understand what it meant to be a winner.
Yeah.
But you could start to feel things starting to come together. But really, for all of us, it wasn't until after the All-Star break that we put that 9-game win streak together, got us back into contention, and then at that point in time, you started to feel things happening, and the Atlanta Fulton County Stadium started to buzz. And I think that's when everything started to get to the place of, wow, we can do this.
I know you came in as a visiting player. I talked to some of your teammates that were here before and realized that, hey, we were playing in front of 5,000 or 6,000 people last year. Maybe even toward the start of the year, there weren't that many people there. But all of a sudden, there were sellouts. There were huge crowds. There was the Tomahawk Chop. I know you've been asked a lot about the 1992 NLCS. I want to ask you about the Grand Slam against the Dodgers, because when I look at that checklist of those moments from the 91 season where you're like, I believe in this team, that's one of those moments.
Yeah, that was a special time. Always seeing that they were in front of us and being able to go up against them and win ball games to take the lead away from them was always a special time. And like you said, after the All-Star break and we started to do that, you had your 5,000 seats, and then it went to 10,000, and then it was 15, and then 20, and then 20, and then you started to hear, the Tomahawk Chop starting to get going, and the whole stadium. It was a very, 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 very special time. I tell people, I said, the 91 season for me was probably the most special time, watching a team go from last place to first place and having a city adopt us the way that they adopted us was a very, very special time for us.
As it happened, you weren't the only team in 1991 that went from last place to first place. We'll fast forward to the end, which is probably not the chapter everybody wanted after the incredible season that you had, but a classic World Series. What were your thoughts and reflections once Game 7 had come to a close?
Again, I tell everybody, I said, all of us want that opportunity to be in those situations. We were one of the two teams that were in that situation with Minnesota, and it was, I go back and I look at the internet and see how many games were won only at last at bat, and and so on and so forth. And it could have gone either way. It really and truly could have. I had opportunity with bases loaded and 1 out in order to score runs in that last game. Terry had a guy on third base with less than 2 outs, and he didn't score. Obviously, we know about Ronnie Gant's double with Lonnie at second base, and so we all had opportunities, but Jack Morris that night was just a little bit better, and he got the job done. So, you got to tip your hat to him. We fought hard. We just weren't able to come home with it.
An incredible season, incredible memories. Thank you for sharing some of the ones you lived through with me. I appreciate it. It's just hard to believe 35 years has come and gone since the Braves went from worst to first and set the trajectory of this franchise in a completely different direction than it had ever experienced. Sid, I appreciate your time.
Man, it's great to be here, and believe me, it was a lot of fun being a part of it. Thank you.
It was a tremendous time to be a Braves fan. Just no two ways about that. Just something unexpected, something magical, and the first of 5 trips to the World Series in the 1990s. And my next conversation was with Steve Avery, who was around for many of those trips to the World Series. And when you talked about 1991 and some of the big contributors and guys who had magical moments in the postseason, Steve Avery against the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1991 is as locked in as I have ever seen a pitcher in postseason play, and he was 21 years old. Here's my conversation with Steve Avery, the man they called the baby-faced assassin back then, a big part of the Braves' World Series runs throughout the 90s. Maybe the greatest season in Braves baseball history. It's been 35 years since the team went from worst to first and set off a whole chain of events that you were a big part of throughout the 1990s, obviously the 95 World Series, but it all got started in 1991. And if we look back on that, as I'm sure you have, you were just a young kid at that time, 20, turning 21 years old. As you came into spring training in 1991, what were your thoughts, expectations, or what were you looking forward to in that season?
I mean, I was just hoping to get better. I was 3-11 as a rookie in 90, so, I was always confident. I wasn't really questioning that I would get better, but, if you haven't felt the, success at that level yet, it makes you wonder a little bit. So I just wanted to get off to a good start in spring training and kind of took that a little more serious than maybe you would later in the year. And then, as the year got going, I got better and better as it went on, and then by the time the playoffs came around, I was really confident. So, it was just a great year overall. The way the fans supported us, just around the All-Star break, you could really feel the momentum building, and we kind of kept it rolling.
And the fact that it was just, I wouldn't say unexpected, but to happen as quickly as it did, because as you mentioned, you kind of come in and the fan support may have been at levels that it was at previous years, but it builds and builds and builds. Sid Bream was telling me it was 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. You start hearing the tomahawk chop. A lot of things started to change. As you guys went through the year, when did you kind of start to realize as you were battling and just trying to maybe catch the Dodgers that, hey, not only can we catch them, we can win this division?
Yeah, I think it was right after the All-Star break. We had a good stretch. They had a bad stretch, and we cut the lead. And, from then on, it was close all the way to the last day. So, we felt like it was almost playoff baseball, even during the season for the last month. And then when we got into the playoffs, it was like we were already ready for it, tested a little bit. And, obviously we played well in Pittsburgh and played well in Minnesota. Just fell one run short.
Well, I got to ask you a little bit about Pittsburgh, because that was, I think, when maybe the entire baseball world was introduced to Steve Avery, who, again, at 21 years of age, threw some of the greatest playoff performances this franchise has ever seen and maybe ever see. What was your mindset? Because like you said, you wanted to get better, and you did that throughout the course of the year. Now you get handed the ball in some really big situations. How did you approach those starts?
Like I said, I was really never a nervous person. I was always pretty confident, so I treated it like another start. But obviously, when you get out there, I was used to the cold weather. Being from Michigan, I think that was a big factor for me. But I just felt good. I went out. I was 21 years old, so sometimes it's good to be young enough where you don't know really what's going on. I didn't really know about being nervous yet, so if it was later in my career, I probably realized it was a little more serious, but at the time, I just went out and treated it like another start.
Yeah, Leo was joking that as you sat down to do a scouting report and he kind of asked you what you're going to do, you said, I'm going to go out there, see what I got, see how I feel, and then pitch appropriately, which, as it turns out, to your point, maybe that was the best way to go about it and not overthink it at all.
Yeah, I always knew my strengths, so, if the hitter's report is that he's got the same strengths that I do, I'm going to take my chances still. So, if I felt good with a certain pitch, I was going to use it, whether he was good at it or not. I just tried to put it in a spot that I couldn't get hurt with. So, I always had pretty good control, and, when I was younger, I had good stuff. So that combination is pretty good when it's going right.
Well, a common thread and a combination for winning was obviously the leadership that this club had in 1991. Terry Pendleton came over, Sid Bream, Rafael Belliard, among others. Just a good group was infused of veterans in with the young core that you had been building and obviously had come through the minors, been drafted and developed. And then there was a great skipper who was leading all of this. It just felt like all of the pieces came together. The GM became the manager, which doesn't happen every day. The right players came in. And then from a leadership perspective, to a man, I've never heard anybody that didn't feel like Bobby Cox helped them believe in themselves, even when maybe it was hard to do.
Absolutely. Like I said, coming off a 3-11 year, I'm sure there was, talk about me not even making the team, going to AAA and trying to get stronger or more, better. And Bobby fought for me to stay there. He actually told me that after I retired and I came back to spring training a couple times. He said, Sherholtz was in favor of sending me back down, and Bobby just told him no. So, I mean, that's just the kind of person he was, kind of manager he was. He had confidence in you and wasn't afraid to take chances too. But he said the leadership with Sid and Terry and, just so many guys that came over just kind of changed the way our defense played. I think for one, we weren't nearly as strong defensively in 90, and then also Terry had an MVP season at the plate. So just kind of a bunch of perfect things coming together, young guys that got better, and then veterans that were hungry and came out and showed us how to take the field every day with a chance to win.
Perfect storm in the best possible ways. As you moved forward into the 90s, eventually 1995 came around. You were a part of that team as well. How gratifying was it to know how hard you guys had worked, how close you had come to finally be able to bring that championship home to Atlanta?
It's the best. I mean, that's why we play, is to try to run on the field, last out of the World Series and be able to tell everyone you're the best team in the world. So, to go through the losses almost made 95 even more sweet. We came close an awful lot of times, and so you realize that it's not easy no matter what. And for us to be able to complete that season on top was pretty special.
Steve, that was a very special time in Braves history. It all started in 1991. Thank you for your time. Thanks for sharing some of the memories of a season I don't think anybody's going to forget anytime soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That was Steve Avery, my conversation with him at Braves Alumni Weekend. Just what a dominant young pitcher. Exploded on the scene. Came up at 20 years old, took his lumps. Could he have been ticketed for the minors in spring of 1991? Bobby Cox said not so fast. 18-game winner 2 times over and a member of the 1995 World Series champions as well. But in 1991, it was his mastery of the Pittsburgh Pirates that put him on the map for the national scene of baseball to take notice that the Braves were building something pretty special down here in Atlanta. When we come back, we will turn our attention back to the 2026 Braves. Yes, we'll jump in our DeLorean and come back to the present day and get you set up for night at Williamsport and a big week to come for the Braves. It all comes your way next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Now, more From the Diamond with Grant McAuley.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90-NATION. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday night, closing out the weekend, closing out this edition of the show as well. Hopefully you enjoyed those conversations I got to have with Sid Bream and with Steve Avery. And then, of course, last week, I talked to Marvin Freeman and Leo Mazzoni, so 4 members of that 1991 team. Next week, we're going to talk to one gentleman who was on the 91 team and one gentleman you know very well was on the 95 team. In fact, both were on the 95 team. It was Mark Wohlers who got the final out. It was Marquise Grissom who caught it. So you'll hear them on From the Diamond here next week in my alumni conversations as we turn back the clock and have some great convos about some great moments in Braves baseball. And hopefully in 2026, there are some great moments ahead. But it's not really feeling like it right now as the Braves are trending in the wrong direction in a number of different ways. None more so than what's not happening at the plate. I laid out some of these stats earlier on, but the Braves have dropped into basically a bottom third offense in Major League Baseball here in the month of August. And despite coming into the month and running an 8-game win streak through the trade deadline and beyond, getting some great starting pitching, last 15 games for the Braves, they have lost 10 of those. And 6 of those 10 losses by 2 runs or fewer. And Atlanta has scored 2 runs or fewer 9 times in the last 15 games. So as I was talking about in a little bit with Chris Sale and the run support that he's not getting and trying to compare and contrast the pitching that we're seeing this month against the offense that we're seeing, even the offensive average of runs per game, which is at about 3.7, you can't really believe it because there are 3 outlier games that really are pulling that number up. And what we're seeing by and large is a team that's struggling to score more than 2 runs per game. And that's a really difficult place to be because it gives your pitching absolutely no margin for error. I mean, look at what we've talked about with Chris Sale. The fact that Chris Sale has lost 9 games this year, it's a wild thing to think about. The fact that the Braves are just 13-10 in the 23 games started by Chris Sale, despite the fact that he is putting up a Cy Young caliber season and has only had truly 1 bad start all year, it just kind of underscores the point that we're making here because a lot of folks kind of pointed to the pitching staff and said, all right, it's Chris Sale and a bunch of question marks. Well, even on the day Chris Sale is pitching, it's not been money in the bank the way that you would hope that it would be when your ace is taking the mound. And some of that I know folks will look at, well, he's facing some number ones for other teams. And yes, he has faced some of those, but it's not like every time Chris Sale goes to the mound, he's facing Jacob Mizorowski. Now, in the postseason, yes, that would be the way that lines up, a 1 versus a 1. But throughout the course of the regular season, you're not hitting the other team's rotation in the exact same order that it would be to face a Chris Sale. These have just been some very frustrating games in which the offense has been unable to back up Chris Sale. They've just been unable to support some of these games, very close games, a lot of one-run games that just have not gone in their way. And one of the big reasons why the Braves lineup is where it is what's not happening at the top of the order. And that was supposed to be a very easy equation to solve. You put Ronald Acuña Jr. in the leadoff spot, and you leave him the hell alone. But we're not doing that anymore. That has not been the thing. And one of the reasons why is injury in 2024. That made you have to solve that problem differently. In 2025, he missed a bunch of time. And then the Braves offense was having so much trouble that you finally gave into the temptation to drop him down in the order to a quote-unquote run-producing spot. And he did fine there. But I was of the opinion that given what he was able to do in 2025, maybe just put Ronald back in the leadoff spot and let him get back to being who he is, who he's capable of being. But that also has not happened this year. Ronald has missed over 50 games with hamstring injuries, and the performance for him has less to do with where he hits in the order and what's not happening when he's at the plate. And I talked about this with Chad Bishop of the AJC a little bit earlier. What is the one thing above all things that is giving Ronald Acuña Jr. the most problems? Would you believe it's four-seam fastballs? Isn't this the pitch that every hitter wants? Give me a fastball. You can figure out all the other stuff, but if you can hit that fastball, you've pretty much solved your own problems. Well, the four-seam fastball has been a huge issue for Ronald Acuña Jr. I looked at his StatCast, and there's a lot of red there, but there's also, unfortunately, a lot of blue. And what does that mean? Well, they have it in percentiles, and if you're in the red, you're doing really well. If you're in the blue, you're heading in the wrong direction, and Ronald is in a weird place in some of these because the bat speed is still elite. In other words, he can still swing it with the best of them in all of Major League Baseball, but he's not squaring the ball up. That percentage is down to the 10th percentile, just under 20%. But his whiff percentage, so the swinging and missing that's going on, what you're seeing is up to 30% this year, and that one is another very low mark as far as StatCast is concerned. But as I talked about with Chad Bishop earlier, Ronald's hitting just 124 on four-seam fastballs. He hit nearly 270 against him a year ago. So I'm just trying to figure out, this seems mechanical, right? It seems swing-related. Now, how exactly do you make the adjustment to fix this? Because you're going to have to, because guess who's noticed? Opposing pitchers. And the four-seam fastball does not have to be 98, 99, 100 miles an hour. Some guys have that, but Ronald's he's getting beat to the spot by 94, 93, 94, 95. I mean, and these can be good fastballs still, but these are also pitches that when in the zone, you want to be able to do maximum damage on it. And sometimes a miss is not necessarily, he swung and missed at that fastball. It's, that was fouled off. He got jammed there. That's kind of the issue with where his swing is, or more importantly, where it's not on four-seam fastballs. In 2023, which is a high water mark for Ronald Acuña Jr., he batted .338 against fastballs of all kinds. In other words, I see a fastball, I am hitting a fastball. That was how it worked. And he's batting just under .300 against four-seamers. So if you're curious, that is absolutely elite level against four-seam fastballs. That is, as far as the run value and all the nice metrics that you like to see on StatCast that I won't bore you with in the interest of time and also the attention span of anybody listening, you didn't need me to tell you, or don't need me to tell you, that Ronald Acuña Jr. is an elite hitter among all hitters in Major League Baseball, but it's just not looking that way this year because of his struggles against fastball. And it's not just velocity that's been the big issue. And again, pitchers have figured this out. We can still crowd him in, pitch him in, and utilize our fastball in different places to get more chase. And I'm not sure, again, how exactly he can go about fixing that, but it's the one thing that's giving Ronald Acuña Jr. the absolute most trouble. He's having a lot of issues with four-seam fastballs. He's punishing sinkers and other fastballs, but just not the four-seam, and that is going to be a big issue. You need to get Ronald Acuña Jr. going, a sub-250 on-base percentage this month. If he's going to be hitting leadoff for you or batting second for you, he's going to have to get that thing back up. I mean, Ronald's a guy that you would expect to get on base at a 380, 390 clip. That's who he's been over the course of his career. But whether it's some time missed, some mechanical issues with the swing, or what have you, this has not been a memorable season for Ronald. He's just never really gotten going outside of a week here or a week there where you start to see the flashes of power and the reminder of who he is. He's in there. He's in the prime of his career. It's just where exactly and how exactly can he get this thing recalibrated? And it's kind of the same thing for Austin Riley. I mean, this was a guy that was super productive for a 3-year span, should be in the prime of his career, and is having all kinds of issues mechanically at the plate in part. and also from a pitch selection and an execution part in game. And that's a difficult thing to bridge because the opposing pitchers are going to figure out what you don't like and what's not working for you, and they're going to give you more of it and more of it and more of it. So how do you adjust to how they have adjusted to you? That is the game of baseball in a nutshell. Let's talk a little bit about some pitching before we get out of here, because there are a couple of things that obviously you need to see kind of dialed in, and that was getting, I think, the bullpen to a more optimal form. And unfortunately, a couple of guys just not in the plans anymore, jettisoned from the roster, Danny Young. And look, sometimes you take a chance on a guy based on just some pure stuff or a different look, a different arm angle, which was the case with Danny Young. He's coming off Tommy John surgery, and he's a guy that pitching coach Jeremy Hefner was apparently high on. That's what I'd kind of heard from a few different conversations. But too wild, too inconsistent. You just you brought him into some leverage situations, especially, and the game just seemed to get woefully out of hand. 16 appearances for Atlanta, an ERA over 8. 15 hits, 13 walks, and 3 hit batsmen in 12 and a third innings. He also allowed a couple of home runs in there. It just wasn't working. It just kind of turned into a big mess. Hopefully Danny Young is a quality dude, will find another opportunity and get a chance to kind of get his career back on track. Again, he was coming off arm surgery, so sometimes you don't get the best version of the guy after that. Then there was Tyler Kinley, who was officially released by the Braves this weekend. It was a big piece of the bullpen early on. I mean, this was a guy, when they signed him in the offseason, I kind of felt like, wow, the Braves have really assembled a nice bullpen. I mean, they signed Robert Suarez. They brought Raisel Iglesias back. They've got Dylan Lee. We didn't even know Didier Fuentes was going to be who Didier Fuentes is until he came into this year and kind of worked himself into a role, and thank goodness he did, because he may prove to be one of the most important arms on the entire Braves pitching staff. Imagine me telling you that after you watched Didier Fuentes, who was called up woefully early last year, not ready for the show. And that's not a knock on him. That was a necessity call-up. But if I told you a year ago Didier Fuentes is going to be extremely important to the Braves bullpen a year from now, you would have told me I am absolutely nuts. Or maybe you would have looked at the stuff and said, okay, I can see it, because that's a quality pitching prospect by anybody's metrics, and he's been terrific in the bullpen. But beside the point, Tyler Kinley officially released this weekend. It just seemed like once he began having real trouble with left-handers, especially with the slider and the home runs that were flying out left, right, and center, his stuff was just down across the board, particularly the slider. It was a really a plus pitch a year ago and could not generate the same kind of swing and miss this year. So without that weapon, just not a reliable reliever that you could deploy in those kind of situations. So you put him out of the picture there, and you bring in, hopefully, when you figure out who's starting for you and who's relieving for you, the potential for a much better version, a revamped Braves bullpen. And Brent Suter clearly is going to be a guy right-handed and from multi-innings that can really help you out as well, the veteran that they picked up at the trade deadline. I think that was really the move that began to make Tyler Kinley kind of irrelevant as far as this team is concerned. Because Suter, that is a guy that, a quality lefty reliever who's had basically a rubber arm for the last few years, has been able to give you a lot of good performance. I think no matter where he's been pitching, this is a guy that takes the ball and he goes out there and he covers those innings for you, and he does it in a quality manner. So he may not throw hard, but he gets the results. And that's the kind of piece that you needed at the deadline, and Suter's certainly that. They're coming up for the Braves, a 7-game homestand. Let's talk a little bit about that. It starts on Tuesday. Obviously, they've got to finish out things with the Milwaukee Brewers, but this was going to be one of the toughest parts of the schedule for the Braves. When you see the Brewers and the Dodgers back-to-back. The two clubs with not just the best records in the National League, not just the division leaders in the other divisions in the National League, but the two best records in baseball. And you get 3 games against the Brewers in which you lost a close one, a couple of well-pitched games, or a couple of low-scoring games anyway, and your offense has just not been able to answer the bell. The Braves have scored 2 runs in this series. You're going to have to score more. That's been the theme of this show. That's been the theme for the Braves in the month of August. And if you want to beat the LA Dodgers, yeah, you're going to have to score more, and it ain't going to be easy to do it. It begins on Tuesday, 3 games against the Dodgers. Then you get 3 games against the Rockies. And I'm not even going to begin to tell you, okay, we can look right over them and expect a series win, because things are not going swimmingly for the Braves. But they do play better at home. They do score more at home. So perhaps that's a favorable matchup to kind of get the Braves heading in the right direction. Then there's one game, it's a makeup against the San Francisco Giants before they head out on the road. When you get into September, here's the road trip that you need to look at. Yeah, you got 2 games against the Nationals. That's a high-scoring team. You did just sweep them in a 4-game series. Then it's 4 games against the Philadelphia Phillies. And what did the Phillies do on Sunday? They came into the bottom of the 9th inning trailing by 4, and they left 6-4 winners over the Cardinals and won their 9th straight game. The Phillies are on a heater. The Braves are very much in need of warming up their bats for the head-to-head matchups because there are 7 games left against the Philadelphia Phillies in the final month of the season. I can't even begin to tell you how important those games are because this could be a photo finish down to the wire. Not what we expected when the Braves marched back out to their commanding lead in the division with their 8-game winning streak. The Phillies said, we'll see your 8-game winning streak and we'll raise you. That is what they have done. So what will the standings look like when the Braves and Phillies meet in early September? We'll see. Atlanta moved into first place in game number 13 of the season. They've been there ever since, but will they be there on the other side of those matchups? Those are things we will talk about. I want to thank Chad Bishop of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for his time for joining the show, and of course my guests Steve Avery and Sid Bream for their time at Braves Alumni Weekend. Great to catch up with them, and great to talk to all of you. We'll be back at it again next week for From the Diamond with Grant McAuley right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. And until then, so long, everyone.